Designers who are from POC backgrounds aren't in those senior positions. Okay, so if we're going to have this conversation, let me just put this off the screen so we can have this different conversation now. So when it comes to diversity in fashion and like, Black designers getting the roles and all these kind of things, I think it's a layered issue because, okay, yes, part of the issue might be, okay, maybe racism or people, don't want to see POCs in this role, but there are also many other aspects to it. So one aspect is just the fact that a lot of POC people don't work in fashion. If I think of my background, as you guys know, the first degree that I did was chemical engineering, and then I studied fashion journalism at CSM after. The reason why I studied chemical engineering is because I'm Nigerian. And in a Nigerian household, if you're not a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or like some other job along those lines, like a dentist, you're basically like, everyone's going to look at you like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you studying that? Like, who does that? That's not a real job. That's not. So we're almost socialized into going into careers that are more stable and quote unquote make more money. And the reason for that is because, effects of maybe slavery and effects of many different things means that a lot of Black people are behind economically. So when a lot of our parents are trying to tell us, okay, study this, it's because they don't want our generation to have the same issues as generations before us. So a lot of, I can't speak for other cultures. I'm Nigerian, so I can only speak for Nigerian culture. But in Nigeria, that's why they're always like, we want you to go into these safe roles, these safe jobs. Even if you look at stats of some of the most successful minorities, especially like, let's say in the US, not by like race or whatever, by like country, Nigerians are actually some of the most successful immigrants in the whole of the US by percentage. And the main reason is because we just get pushed into that stuff, whether you like it or not. So what this kind of culture breeds is people that are creative don't ever get to explore their creativity. So most of the POC kids that you see that do work in fashion, some of them have had to fight their family, fight for their right to work in fashion, fight against their parents. Some of them have been disowned by their parents for being creative. Like, it's quite deep. So that means I'm giving you all this context to say that because of all these reasons, even the pool of POC people in fashion is lacking compared to, let's say English people. Because once again, I can't speak for other countries. I can only speak to cultures that I know a lot about. So in England, a lot of people's parents are very supportive. Like a lot of my white English friends, whatever they do, their parents are like, oh, that's amazing. We'll support you. Whatever you do, that's great. That's fine. So maybe other people culturally have the freedom to feel like they can pursue creative fields. And maybe also because they're more financially well off, they have more scope to work in fashion, because in fashion, to gain experience, you might have to do an unpaid internship in London. And how can you afford to live in London if you're not rich, right? Because if you're being unpaid for an internship, how are you going to pay rent in London? That's really expensive. How are you going to afford bills, right? So there's so many aspects to it. Racism is obviously one issue. That's a part of it, but it's quite layered. So yeah, I just thought I'll mention that because I haven't actually spoken about that in a stream or something like that. But I think that, sometimes we look at the issue in a very narrow way, because even like most people that I talk to, like even let's say like when I go on dates, like a lot of the women that I go on dates with are Black women, right? And every time I say that, and a lot of them are Nigerian too, and every time I say that, oh, like, I work in fashion, or I'm a fashion journalist and I study fashion journalism at uni, they're like, people study that as a degree? You don't need to study that. Like, why do you need to study fashion in school? Like, that's not, can't you just learn that on your own? because sometimes I feel like we are in our fashion bubble sometimes, and I feel like if we come out of that fashion bubble, we actually realize that it's a deeper issue. Someone said Jamaican here. This is so true. I'm third generation Black Caribbean. My family just want me and my cousins to do what makes us happy and pay bills. Most of us are self-employed now. Um, what did Leo say? This happens a lot at Cambridge. Most POCs go for degrees with a clear economic/financial trajectory, like law or medicine. Very few do arts/humanities degrees like English or classics. Exactly. That's why I date women who are creative academics. As a Black girl, wanting to pursue fashion was difficult to understand for my family. In a way, the fact that there are people like Bernard Arnault, big money, kind of made fashion serious for my family. When I went to Parsons, my family said good luck, but it was very clear not to ask for money towards this money pit of a career. I know exactly what that feels like. I was on a pathway to do law and just kind of realized that almost 30, I can actually make money doing art/humanities. Never told it was possible. I mean, also, okay, let's even come out of the POC conversation. Like, so I went to sixth form. Sixth form in the UK is where you go to school between the ages of 16 to 18. It's before you go to university. University is what Americans call college. And I went to a really good sixth form, like academically is really good. It's a specialist maths and languages school. So my school was exceptionally good at maths and languages. And when I remember my school, when we used to have like career visits and visits from different people that will tell us about different careers, they only told us about engineering and like maths and stuff because that's just what was expected of us. And when it came to universities, the way people used to view university was like, okay, you need to get into Oxford or Cambridge. That was like the mentality in my school is like, if you don't get into Oxford or Cambridge, you at least have to go to a Russell Group school. And if you don't, you've basically flopped. That was like the mentality. So to even think of art was just so like, fashion? What? That was so far removed from like the reality. It was just insane. It's a deeper issue, it's true, but I can tell you it's also a convenient situation for these brands. I can tell you from my own experience. Yeah, I'm not saying that obviously, like I said, an element might be racism or they don't want POCs to be in these roles, but I just thought I'd add more context that there are many other reasons too, because, you know, the talent pool of POCs is not the same as the talent pool of like, let's say white people. So let's say for every POC you have working in the fashion industry, you might have 15 white people. So if we just go by mathematical probabilities, it's just way more likely you're going to hire a white person because there's just way more white people in the industry, especially in the West, like where these brands are situated, like, you know, Paris, Milan, Rome, all these kind of places, London. Yeah, I agree. There is a big racism and classism issue in fashion. I agree. Rishi, the Tory puppet muppet, wanting to force kids to stay on maths till 18, yet defunding the arts. Jail. Yeah, don't even get me started about the UK government. Absolute disaster, mate. Absolute disaster. Absolute disaster, mate. Yeah, there is a lot of racism. And also, even so, racism is also something that, like, there's layers to it, right? Because there's everything from, let's say, upper class people who are just super, super racist and like hate black people to their core. They hate POCs to their core. And then there are some people that are just oblivious to it, which is almost just as bad. And I didn't actually know this was a thing until I went to sixth form, right? Because basically, like, before I went to sixth form, because my school was really, really, really white. I'd never been in an area that was that white in my entire life till I went to sixth form. So I was born and grew up in London, very multicultural. Then I moved to Nigeria for 7 years, which is basically just everyone is black, apart from like a few other people. Like there's like quite a few Lebanese people, quite a few Indians. quite a few like people from China in Nigeria, and then that was kind of it. So apart from that, everyone was just black. So that was kind of what I was used to. So my idea of what racism was like the people that are really hateful and like, you know, will say things like, I've had friends that have applied for jobs in the UK and they don't get the job because in the interview, the employer is like, we like your resume, but just as a last thought, we just thought that you don't fit into the work culture because, you know, there's no one here that, you know, looks like you. And they like say that so brazenly. So that was like my idea of like racism, like people blocking your opportunities deliberately, people saying the N-word, people, you know, calling people like me monkeys behind my back, all that kind of crap, right? But then when I went to where I went to sixth form, these people were just so ignorant, and it didn't come from a place of like hate, it just came from a place of stupidity. It came from a place of, because when I went to sixth form, I just came back from Nigeria. So in this school, people are asking me really dumb questions about Nigeria. Like I remember one girl in my class asked me, how come you have social media? Like, do you guys have like internet in Nigeria? Like, how do you have like you're on like Facebook and like Twitter and stuff? And like, and I'm like, fucking hell, like I'm in a school that's like known for academic achievement. In this school, we have some of the smartest students in the whole country. We have some of the best grades in the whole country in the school. And here we have this girl asking me if I have internet in Nigeria in the 21st century. Like, and it didn't even come from a place of like, I hate black people or racism. It just came from like, just a lack of brain cells. Because anyone with half a brain knows that there's internet in every country in the world. It's literally the 21st century. But sometimes when people are just not exposed, there's just lapses in like the way they think. And I experienced a lot of that in that school that made me realize, oh, so some people are actually really racist, and then some people are ignorant, and then they do things that can be seen as racist. Like, that's why I'll be working in fashion, and then it doesn't occur to people to have diversity until they look at me. So I've been working for a big brand. I won't say what brand, but there was a time when I was working for this really big brand, and we were doing this campaign, and they were picking models for the campaign, and every model that they picked was like typical tall, white, blonde, blue eyes. And then they looked at me after picking all the models, and they're like, "Oh, Ayo, do you have any black models that you like that you'd like to recommend?" So my life experience has made me realize there's actually layers to like racism and prejudice and like why POCs are left out of these spaces. So racism is definitely a factor, but there are so many other layers that obviously need to be explored too. But yeah, you have better odds as a POC with a British white person in fashion, but the Italian fashion companies, forget it. French, I'll say, is 50-50. What did Gabrielle say? Yeah, but if you're ignorant and you just ask a question to learn, it's okay, but you're not being hateful. Yeah, I mean, obviously she like I said, it didn't come from a hateful place when she was asking me if like we have internet in Nigeria, but it just like it was so stupid. It was such a stupid statement that I didn't even know how to respond. I didn't even know what to say, because it's just like I've only lived in two countries, England and Nigeria, and I know in every other country in the world there's internet. So it was just so like, it was just so insane. I was just like, I get it. Like, she just didn't know, but it's like, you should know. You just should know that, though. Like, you just should know that. Like, it's a naivety in an adult that's baffling. Exactly. It's so baffling. Like, it's just like, how can you lack intelligence that much to ask me such a question? And how old was she? Like, At that point, we were 17. I just feel like at the age of 17, certain things, there's no excuse. If you were like 11, ignorant, I would get it. At the age of 17, that's insane. Like, that's so insane. It's just so like mind boggling. It's just so, it's like, wow. A person I talked to once thought we all do our shopping at bazaars in Turkey. Why are people so like unenlightened? I don't understand, because we actually live in an internet age. Like, now should be the time more so than ever that people shouldn't be that stupid or think those kind of things. People think the whole of Turkey is just one grand bazaar. I think everywhere you walk in Turkey, you're just walking through the Grand Bazaar. That's crazy. Oh my God, people are actually so silly. The arrogance of ignorance. I love that. I personally think they do it on purpose. So I can actually tell. I'm really good at like reading body language and like knowing people's intentions. That comes from life experience. So I can tell you the ones that say it and they're trying to be, you know, like cheeky. And then I know the ones that say it that are actually, you know, being like, they just genuinely don't know. It comes from ignorance. And that people do it on both ends. So some people do it on purpose, and then some people, they're just that ignorant. A lot of people at Cambridge are very sheltered / more ignorant than actually malicious. Yeah, I mean, like, for example, let me since we're talking about this, let me show you guys a map of where my school was, just to give you, especially for guys that aren't from the UK, just to give you a sense of why this shit was so insane to me about like why people didn't know. So let me see if I can share this on the screen, and then we'll move to the next news story. But this is kind of fun because we can talk about things like this in our live stream. But okay, so this is the map of the UK. This is England right here, obviously. So obviously I've got loads of bookmarks in London, places I go to all the time. Don't watch that. But okay, so this is London, right? This is London here. This bit here is like London. Now, where my school was is in Kent, which is like all the way here. So my school was here in an area called Sandwich, right? This is where my school was, in Sandwich, which is kind of funny. The name is kind of funny. Now, think of how close this area here is to London. Like, look at where London is. London is here, and Sandwich is here. You can take a 2-hour train to London from Sandwich. Yet, when I went to school in Sandwich, everyone was telling me, oh my God, you're my first black friend. You're the first black person I've talked to on a level. You're the first black person I've this, that. And I'm like, have you not been to London? You're right there. This is Kent here. This is London. Like, it's just there. It's literally a 1.5 hour train. If you take the high speed train, you'll get to London in 1.5 hours. How have you not met black people before? How? And it wasn't like a really poor area. It wasn't like a working class area. So it wasn't like, there's no excuse of, oh, we can't afford to take the train or travel to London or whatever. It's like, how? How can you be so ignorant when you're so close to London? I don't get it. I don't understand it. And it's also like the demographics of England, because obviously what I was used to was obviously growing up in London. So I was just used to multicultural London. Quite literally in England, in every direction from London, to be fair, but the further you go this way, the whiter it goes. And when I went to school in Sandwich, a lot of like my friends from school, they lived in all these surrounding areas. So like Dover, Deal, Ramsgate, Broadstairs, Margate, all these kind of places, Aylsham. these places are white as hell, which is so interesting because it's so close to London, but the demographic is so different. But anyway, that's the geography lesson. That's the geography lesson for the stream. People in Sandwich definitely got bread. It was an expensive area because it's by the coast. So a lot of like rich people, their like retirement houses are there. So they have retirement houses by the coast and like by the beach. So that's why it's like kind of like an expensive areas. Like you'd see people driving like Bentleys and stuff. Oh my God, you live in Gillingham. That's not too far from Sandwich. So Jackie knows all about what I'm talking about. Jackie knows exactly what I'm talking about. Glad to know Margate in the UK is as white as Margate in South Africa. They live a segregated life and they do not think to venture beyond it. I guess that's what it is, but I just wouldn't want to live my life that way. Why wouldn't you want to be like exposed and just learn about different people and different cultures and like the way different people live and the way different people interact? It gives you a better understanding of just the world and life in general. And there's always stuff you can learn from different cultures and different people, because people do things differently and you can always learn from people that do things differently to you. So I just think it's a very closed-minded way to just live your life. To only concern yourself with like things that are like immediately around you and stuff. Especially once again, now that we have the internet. Yeah, just like what Oliver is saying, especially with the internet, there are no excuses. But that's why it shocks me. But the reason why I'm having this conversation is just to say that like the conversation around lack of POCs at the top of fashion is layered. It's very, very layered. There's many elements to it. Okay, so what you just watched is a clip from the live stream. I thought I'd film this quick video while I was editing because I realized that there's an extra point that I didn't make in the live stream that now that I'm clipping the video and then posting it out further, it's something I want to make a point. So most of the points I've already made. Racism does exist. It's an issue in the industry, definitely. And there are also other factors that factor into why, let's say we don't see a lot of POCs get further in fashion. Part of it is because the talent pool is less. So why is that a big issue? Because we'll probably see more POCs in, higher positions of power in fashion if there were just more people in general. How do we combat that? It's about just parents and a new generation of POCs understanding that you can be successful being a creative, and we now live in a different world. There are, content creators that are more successful than even doctors. So if it's about money or it's about finance or it's about, wanting your kid to be financially stable, there are creative roles where people are very stable, making a lot of money. So it's really having that understanding, people going into schools and actually letting kids know, what careers are actually available to them, not just the traditional, oh, you can be an accountant, and if you don't want to be an accountant, if you're good at biology, then be a doctor. If you're good at chemistry, then be an engineer, or be a chemist. There's just more to life than that. And I think a lot of education needs to be had on that front, on actually educating kids from these backgrounds on the different possibilities that are available to them, if that makes sense. I think it's very beneficial to always, if you're going to talk about, let's say, how racism affects the industry, it's always best to talk about all the layers. Because otherwise, if you don't talk about all the layers, what happens is you have a situation where the conversation is really basic and it doesn't go anywhere. It's like, oh, the industry is racist. Okay. And how does that manifest in how we're going to change it? Are we going to un-racist people? Because when you start to look at the layers, you can start to find solutions. Like another layer that I talked about in the live stream is the fact that, a lot of POC kids, because of things like the effects of slavery and where a lot of, let's say, POCs were displaced when slavery ended and how they were economically stifled. It just means that generationally, a lot of POC communities have, progressed a lot slower. And that means that because they're behind, they can't afford to do the same things that, let's say, my white counterparts in the UK would do. So we're talking about unpaid internships. Really, you can only do an unpaid internship if you have money, because you spend a lot of money doing an unpaid internship. You have to spend a lot of money to travel. In London, that's very expensive. You have to buy lunch when you're, at work. And then sometimes you might even be forced against your will into doing these team bonding activities. You have to go to the pub with your team members because you want to be a team player. And then all of you have to split the bill, but you don't actually have any money all these kind of things, you can't really afford it unless you have money, or unless you have a family that lives in London and you can kind of stay with family there or whatever. And so the solution to that would be, okay, stop doing unpaid internships in fashion, which is something that I've always said I don't like. And I really hate the idea that in fashion, we've okayed this idea that unpaid internships are okay and they're fine. So that's something that needs to change. And internships that stop being unpaid will not completely fix, but will definitely improve this issue, for example, because the people that are most affected by unpaid internships are actually POCs, because POCs are the ones who are most likely to not be able to afford to do those internships. And then they suffer for it, and then they can't progress in the industry, because to progress, you need experience. But then you can't get that initial experience unless you do the unpaid internship. But then you can't do the unpaid internship unless you have money, unless you have family in London, which is not what everyone has, right? So then you're now just basically far behind, and now you're just trying to play catch up. And these are factors that are not in your control. You don't control how rich your family is when you're born. You don't control where you're born when you're born. Things also need to happen in the industry, like unconscious bias training, so that, people that have these things unconsciously, but they don't think about it. Kind of what I was explaining when I was in school in Sandwich. A lot of things happen a lot where people's unconscious bias would manifest in many different ways, even though to their core, these people are not racist and they're not being malicious. But sometimes your unconscious bias can lead you to say things that can be deemed as racist and can lead you to act in ways that is detrimental to POCs. And you can do things that have a knock-on effect of taking away opportunities from people, even if that wasn't your intention. And so that happens a lot. So yeah, I thought I'd just add this context. I did already explain kind of all these things in the live stream clip, but I thought I'd reiterate it because being on YouTube for so long, I know people don't listen to what I say. Happens every single video where someone comments, oh, you didn't say this, and I literally said it word for word. And I think by me reiterating it this way, it's very hard for people to then say, oh, you didn't say this, because I've said it twice. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or the next live stream clip or the next live stream, whichever one you watch. Thank you. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.